My work now really revolves around helping people and organizations specifically realize the abundance that they do have. And it's also proven scientifically, but also just in my professional experience, I found that the organizations of people and leaders who are the most giving people are the ones that attract the most talented people to work for their organization and also the most loyal customers, because it's proven that people just want to be a part of something that's great. They want to be a part of something that's contributing something to the greater good in the world. And so if you're a really talented person and you're looking for a firm, an organization, a group to work for, and you go into an organization and you find that there's a really giving culture there, that people support and care for each other because they want the success of the organization to be important, then it's more likely that you're going to choose working for that organization.
Welcome to the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. Your guide on this journey is Amy Silvas. If you're ready for the secrets to an abundant life, hit that subscribe button now, and let's get started.
Secrets to Abundant Living podcast community. I am so excited to welcome you to another amazing episode. As you know, I work so hard to bring impactful, powerful, meaningful guests. And today we have my good friend, Bob DePasquale. And before I ask him to tell us more about himself, I want to give some color around how I met him. Many of you have heard our episode with Gunnar Esiason, who also lives with cystic fibrosis, as I do. And Bob is his cousin. So Gunnar actually connected us. And my goodness, Bob has an incredible story. His vision for life and how he decides to help others is so impactful. So Bob, welcome. I'm so delighted to have you today.
Amy, I'm pumped to be here. I love the connection that we made and anything I can do to support the cause. And I really appreciate the opportunity today.
This is great. And, I was remiss in mentioning you were actually at our Invest Like the Rich Summit a few months ago, and our attendees loved what you brought to the table. So as we talked about before we hit record, I wanted to make sure to get you in front of another segment of our audience because you're just so impactful. So tell us more about yourself, if you don't mind.
Sure. I am pretty much a native Floridian here in the States, although I was born up in New York. You mentioned my cousin Gunnar and the family that lives up there. So I spent most of my time here in South Florida, but I'm really a New Yorker by heart. And so I spent my college days up there studying at Hofstra University, if anyone's familiar with that, for undergrad. Then came back to South Florida to study communication and broadcasting at the University of Miami, and somehow ended up in the financial space. And now I love to talk about generosity. So that's a little bit about me in a nutshell. We were talking shortly before this about how I love to travel as well. So anything that deals with new experiences, meeting new people, and finding ways to connect across the globe is right up my alley. So this is another opportunity, hopefully, to connect with some other people as they listen. So thank you.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Well, you mentioned generosity, and what a perfect connection to the theme of this podcast, which is abundance. We have a lot of high income, powerful people that listen to this podcast that realize that what brings them happiness, fulfillment, and all of these great things in life isn't necessarily money, but one of those pillars is being generous. So I think I already know the answer, but for formality's sake, I'd love to hear how you define abundance for yourself.
Oh, that's beautiful. So abundance for me is the ability to think about what you have as a blessing or an opportunity to use and share in the world. I think a lot of us have an abundance of things and gifts and skills, and sometimes material possessions could be money, but it doesn't have to be. And unfortunately, I think sometimes the world tells us that we don't have enough and we have too many more things that we have to go out and do and courses to take and books to read. And I hope people are listening to this podcast, but you can only listen to so many podcasts. I think a lot of times we just have to use what we already have for good because we have it and we can use it and we can use it well for the people around us. And so generosity to me is absolutely abundance. Abundance for me is how we use the things that we have to share and for good in the world.
That's beautiful. And to your point, I think culture does really reinforce this state of lack, right? Because how do we get people to keep buying? You have to be dissatisfied. You're fulfilled in yourself if you're, giving and have overflow to others. Maybe there's not as much of a prompt to buy things. That's a whole other conversation. But, just given the story that you shared at our summit and, it really seems to be a common thread, not just with you, but with your entire family, from what I know of your family. It's this giving nature that seems to provide so much fulfillment. Can you tell us a bit more about how you help others cultivate, generosity and things like that, whether personally or professionally? Because you're an expert at it. You're the chief generosity guy, if memory serves me, right?
Yes, I do go by that moniker on occasion.
Yeah.
And I would love to share, more about how generosity has changed my life. My work now really revolves around, and you mentioned abundance just a moment ago, about helping people and organizations specifically realize the abundance that they do have. And I have found, and it's also proven scientifically, but also just in my professional experience, I found that the organizations of people and leaders who are the most giving people are the ones that attract the most talented people to work for their organization, and also the most loyal customers, because it's proven that people just want to be a part of something that's great. They want to be a part of something that's contributing something to the greater good in the world. And so if you're a really talented person and you're looking for a firm, an organization, a group to work for, and you go into an organization and you find that there's a really giving culture there, that people support and care for each other because they want the success of the organization to be important, then it's more likely that you're going to choose working for that organization. So a lot of my work these days around generosity is not just helping people give tangible assets that they have, but help them support the people around them and attract other people to do the same. And I'll be honest with you, Amy, and I'm sure you could agree to this. And in my family, for sure, generosity is absolutely contagious. When you see it and feel it, you're much more likely to participate in it yourself. And so I have some, like I said, it's scientific. There are certain hormones in the way that the body and mind works that have proven that it is literally contagious. But I think most people, even without understanding all the science behind it, they can just feel it. When you see something generous happen, it feels good, right? I mean, or whether you're the giver, the receiver, or even a third party just witnessing something nice, it's like, wow, that feels kind of good. And it makes you think about doing those type of things yourself in the future.
Gosh, I love that you make that connection, because I hadn't really thought about that, quite candidly, of organizations, having this culture of generosity and the type of people that they attract. Because not only, as you said so well, are people interested in how they can impact, but I'm imagining that they also infer how the organization is going to treat them on their journey professionally and all of that. So there's kind of this synergistic, impact of how will it benefit me? How can I benefit others? I think that's so interesting. I personally, as you know, I run a real estate private equity firm, and I get a lot of investors who are part of, highly successful corporate America. And a lot of those folks actually come from not a lot, but a good number are from overseas. And they talk about kind of this overall general American culture of, if I have something, that doesn't mean that takes away from you. We can all have, increase the piece of the pie, have incredible generosity without having a scarcity mindset. I know that's not pervasive across American culture or unique to American culture, but I think it just really highlights creating a culture, as it were, and it being contagious, whether it's within your social sphere, within your family, within a company, or even a national culture.
I completely agree. In my experience dealing with, I worked in the financial space, and I still do, but for about 15 years now. And part of the reason why I took that role and I left broadcasting was because I felt like I was going into what I thought was the belly of the beast, Amy. I felt like, wow, if some of the greed practices in the broadcasting industry that I felt and experienced in a couple of years working there, if those were that bad there, I can only imagine how they were in the financial space, in the investment space. And I would imagine you've seen it somewhat, or at least there might be some belief that would be in the venture capital, the investment space, in the real estate space. And what happens is, what happened to me was I was extremely surprised. I mean, I was blown away that when I started working for a large financial firm, I was surprised that there's actually a lot of people out there who are naturally giving, generous people. But the problem goes back to what we just mentioned a couple moments ago, was that there's this belief, or there's there's a scarcity mindset in the market today. There's so many messages out there telling us, well, we can all agree, I would imagine, that we're kind of overstimulated these days with technology and everything. And a lot of those messages tell us that there isn't enough. And so what I found was in the financial world, when I was counseling people and families and organizations on making wise financial decisions, a lot of them would say, well, I would love to someday be a really giving person. I would love to spend more of my time doing this. But a lot of times it was, well, I can't keep up. I got my family, I got my work, I got my business, I got, there's too many taxes. There's so many different excuses of reasons why they couldn't give. And I felt like it was really taking away from their experience in life. But the organizations and business leaders that I worked with, whether they knew it or not, the ones who were the most generous, the ones who cared about the people that they employed or worked with and had programs and systems in place in their business, were the ones that were the most successful. Whatever definition of success that was, but they came into the office on most days, or when they got a phone call from me that said, hey, we got to check up on something related to your financial plan. Those were the ones who were the most joyful, the most happy, and the most fulfilled in their work. And that told me over the years that there's something missing here for these other firms that might be successful in some ways. But when the business owner or the person in charge comes to me and they feel like they're caught in a tough situation and it's almost like the phone calls and the meetings they had with me were the ones that they dreaded. It was like a necessary evil to come meet with Bob. But the other ones, it was like a joy. It's like, oh, Bob, I'm so glad you called. Can't wait to our next meeting. And those people were the people that were the most giving. So that told me that we're missing something here. And those people got it. And that's how it led me to a lot of the work that I do today. And what I did was I asked these people questions. And I sat down and I said, hey, what are the systems that you have? Most of them, like I just said a second ago, didn't even realize that they were giving people. So it's not even about identifying yourself as, hey, I'm a super generous person. It's going to make me a good business owner. It's about just practicing those things in your daily habits, whether you know it or not. And that was really, really powerful to me when I was kind of making that decision on how much time do I want to spend on helping organizations build this type of culture? And that was huge.
Yeah, I could see that being very huge and fulfilling on your end too. So, I don't want to give away Bob's secret sauce as you help organizations, achieve this, but, people that are listening really want to incorporate more generosity, abundance into their business. Do you have maybe a quick 1 or 2 tips that, folks can take away, that they can implement? Again, working with you, I know it takes a lot more complexity there. And, it's not just about 1 or 2 tips, but just to give people a little preview.
Absolutely. I have 2 things that I'll say. The first one is, I think identifying what generosity really means to you. And there can be many, many different creative ways to express generosity in your life and ultimately in your business. So I'm glad that you asked me the question about abundance earlier, because it's somewhat related. I think the way you think about generosity yourself is critical. The way you think about it, Amy, could be a little bit different than the way I think about it, different than the way one of your customers thinks about it, different than the way that one of my clients. There's no perfect definition of it. So the first thing is to really define it for yourself. And I feel like a lot of people usually trace this kind of deep thinking back to a specific event or moment or time in their life. And and talking about the summit from earlier this year, I told a story about why generosity is meaningful to me. I'd be happy to share that. But the idea is that I spent a lot of time thinking about what it actually means to me and how I can express generosity in my own life. So that's the number one thing that I would do for any business leader out there. Really consider what would be meaningful and generous to you and how you can express it. And then for a more practical, or I shouldn't say more practical, but a step-by-step type of approach that I introduce to many of the organizations that I speak with, I call it the ACE process. And I wouldn't say you can ever truly ace generosity because it's a long journey. Things don't always go perfect. It can be very joyful along the way, but there really is no perfection in giving. And so maybe I need to change the word ACE, but I love a good acronym. So the first thing is you need to ask. And you need to take action. If you want to build a culture of generosity in your organization, you have to know what's meaningful to the people around you. So do actionable things to be kind, to be nice, and to be giving to people, whether that's offering them assistance in their work, or offering them something specific that they need to help with their job, or assigning them something that you feel like will give them an opportunity to grow and be creative. So that's the first thing. take action, and ask people questions about what they feel. So that's the A. The C is to create. So once you have data and information and feedback from people, now start really simple and create a program or a consistent habit of your own around the office, whether it's virtual or in person, that you can execute consistently. And that might be as simple as something like celebrating wins on Friday afternoon or Monday morning, or whenever that meeting is that you always have. Do something to give people some fulfillment and joy in the work that they do. And every week, make that a consistent habit. That's just one example. And then finally, the E process is really, really important for understanding how people will be able to restart their own loop. And so if you're going to help people get involved in the process, you have to explain to them the importance of giving and the importance of that, whatever that program that you just created in the C step, that maybe it's the shout outs for something good or small wins in your meetings. You have to explain to them why it's important and let them execute. And then once they start executing and doing things repeatedly themselves, then that restarts the process, because the ACE process recycles, because once they've executed themselves and done things, now all of a sudden they've taken action in their own right. And then once they've taken action, now they can create something and then ultimately explain it to the people that they work with, and it continues to cycle again. So you asked for some things to help people do that. Number one was consider what generosity means to you yourself. And then number two would use what I call the ACE process, and I can give you notes or tips and anything on that you can share with people.
I love that. Well, I love that it isn't just a process that's self-contained, but, as you mentioned, the E part of empowering other people to really, kind of continue that cycle, continue that ripple, if you will. And that leads really, really nicely into what you alluded to earlier is, at what point in your life did you realize that generosity or abundance was meaningful to you? You hinted at it, but if you feel comfortable sharing, it is a powerful story that really rocked my world when I heard it. So I'd love to share it with the audience if you feel up to it.
Absolutely. So when I was 18 years old, I felt like I was an invincible 18-year-old child. Now, I know not everyone feels like that. Someone like yourself, Amy, may have not felt quite invincible dealing with CF. So everyone's experience is different. But when I was 18, I thought I was on top of the world. I felt like I was going to go take down in New York City, and I was going to go to college, and I was going to play football and get my education and do everything that an 18-year-old wants to do in his life at that time. Now, if you're listening out there and you felt that kind of invincibility feeling when you were younger, this might resonate with you for sure. But in a very short period of time, I went from thinking that I was invincible to suddenly kind of being knocked off my pedestal, if you will. I was in training camp playing football, and I had what I thought was a groin injury. And in very short order, I was taken off the field, could no longer prove myself. I was a freshman trying to prove myself to my coaches and my teammates. And it just seemed like all of a sudden, everything that I had and dreamed and hoped for was kind of coming crashing down. Now, little did I know that what I was going through was critical in my life. But there was a period of time where I was doing exercises to try to rehab myself, anything that I could possibly do, thinking that it was all me, that I was going to be the one that was going to overcome this by myself. And ultimately, at one point, my head trainer, called me out in front of the whole team in the training room there one morning, early in the morning during training camp there. And he told me, Bobby, they called me Bobby back then. He's like, quit being a weakling. You need to get back out on the field. And so I knew physically I had some issues. But when you have someone tell you mentally that you're a weakling, that's a whole different animal. Now suddenly mentally and physically, I felt like something was wrong. And so I told him, I said, listen, and I don't know if I was the nicest person. I wasn't as generous as I should have been back then. But I said, I think I said to him, maybe, to be honest with you, I think I said to him, Rick, listen, you're the trainer. I'm doing every exercise that you told me to do. I don't know what they're paying you here in college, but obviously it's not working. It's not my fault I'm not on the field. You're the one that needs to figure out how to fix me. And he ended up saying, listen, this is more than a groin injury. You need to go to the doctor. So he sends me to the doctor. I'm an 18-year-old kid, but technically an adult, driving around New York, Long Island, up there. If you're familiar with the area, I mean, even 20-something years ago, the traffic was just disastrous. And I would go to these appointments, and I don't know about medical insurance. I mean, I was just on another planet. I just felt like the world was coming to an end because I was doing all this stuff. I had no idea what was going on. And then I had I had ultrasounds, CAT scans, sonograms, MRIs, everything to try to figure out what was wrong with me. And they just couldn't figure it out. I'll never forget this. I had one additional appointment to go to. And at this appointment, I expected to go in there and sit in the waiting room and fill out a bunch of paperwork and sit there for hours and then go to the radiology department and get all these tests done like I had been doing for a week and a half at this point. Well, I walked into the office, and the moment I walked in, they called me back. It's like they knew I was coming. I opened the door, I stepped into the office, the waiting room there, and they said, "Bobby, come right in." And I was like, okay, this is kind of strange. So I walk in, I sit down in the examination room, and the doctor walks in 30 seconds later, sits down at the table and looks me right in the eye and says, "Bobby, you have cancer." And I looked at him, dead silent. My mouth was just hanging open. I had no idea what to say, totally blown away by what he had just told me. And the only thing I can remember at this point was him saying to me, "Don't panic. We'll hook you up with an oncologist. You're free to go." And I said, "What? I don't even know how to spell oncologist, no less what is it? I mean, what do you mean?" And that's all I remember. I walked out of the room, silent, dead silence after I said what I said. And the moment I walked outside of this building, strange building, never been there before, and I walked out of the automatic sliding glass doors there, and as soon as I stepped outside, my phone rang. Now, it's like divine timing. I can't even explain it. It's like it was the perfect plan for the phone just to ring right when I walked out of the building. And it was my mom. And she said, "Hey, we just landed." Now, they had been coming up. They had planned this trip before they even knew what was wrong with me to come up to New York to visit. And she said, "I expected you to be in your appointment this whole time, but I'll leave a voicemail, but I'm glad you picked up. We landed. We'll meet you back at your uncle's house." And she said, "But before I let you go, how did the appointment go?" And I said to her, "So Mom, about that appointment," I had to explain to her, Amy, what the doctor told me. And she was dead silent, probably more silent than I was when the doctor made the announcement. But it just seemed like she was screaming. I couldn't, the feeling through the phone was like nothing I'll ever forget. And the only thing I could hear was my dad screaming on the other end, "Susan, Susan, like, what's wrong?" And he could tell something was wrong too, just for my mom's deathly silence. And so we met back at my uncle's house and we shed some tears. I hugged my parents. I had never been away from home that long. Like I'm an only child, mama's boy. And we said a few prayers and looked at each other like, well, what's going on? So the next couple of days had gone by and we're kind of in shock, doing planning, meeting with oncologists, doctor, whatever, trying to figure out what it was. That was a Thursday. Saturday comes along, and this was going to be my first game. Obviously, we knew that I wasn't playing in a football game at this point. But my uncle's best friend, Tim, came over his house that morning. Now, we've never met Tim before in our lives. We're from Florida. We're up in New York. And it's a random Saturday morning. We're sitting around in the kitchen there. He walks into the room, and I think it was my aunt who went to get the door, and they come in, and he's saying, I says hi to my uncle, and walks directly over to my parents as if they were like best friends. He walks over to my parents, pulls his keys out of his pocket, and he kind of, it looked like he was shoving them in their face. Like I was almost like, what is this guy doing? He goes, "Bob and Susan, take my keys and my car. I can only imagine what you're going through with your son right now. You can use my car for as long as you need it." And I thought to myself, wow, that's probably the most generous thing someone's ever done for my family and I. And I was like, wow, like, what do I even say to this guy? And shortly after that, he said, "It's really nice to meet you." Said goodbye to my aunt and uncle and said, "Wish you guys the best," and left. And that was it. He was gone. I mean, he must have been there for maybe 15 minutes and I didn't see him again. He just left. So that was Saturday. A few more days go by. I was advised by one of my oncologists to still take classes, like not to drop all my college classes and stay in New York to get treated. for what was cancer. And I came out of my second ever college class on that Tuesday morning, and I went to the cafeteria to grab something to eat. And I'm sitting there eating and I'm watching the news. And now I don't know the news station. I mean, I'm in New York. I'm 18 years old. I don't even watch the news in Florida. No, let's come up to New York because I didn't choose this. But I'm watching the news and all of a sudden a plane hits a building. And I'm like, man, like that's a terrible accident. So I called my dad and I said, hey, you watching the news? He goes, yeah, I'm watching this. That really stinks. And then we're talking for less than a minute and bam, another plane hits the building right next to the one that was hit. And we didn't know it at the time, but my dad was like, man, that's not an accident. You better hurry up and get home. So that was September 11th, 2001. And that was the terrorist attacks there in the World Trade Center in New York. And it was typically a 15-minute drive from school where I went to college to my uncle's house. And I hopped in the car. I ran out of that cafeteria. I don't know, the breakfast burrito I was eating is probably still sitting there on the counter. I mean, I ran out of that place so fast. And I drove from school to my uncle's house. It took me 9 hours of what was typically a 15-minute drive. And I'll never forget this. I mean, I'm listening to the whole thing on the radio, burning towers in the distance. I pulled into my uncle's neighborhood and ran out of gas. We pushed my car down the road in the neighborhood into his driveway there. My parents and my aunt were there. We're all looking at each other. And I was thinking, man, I was this invincible 18-year-old just a couple of weeks before that. Then I thought maybe my life is coming to an end with my illness. But now I'm thinking maybe the world's coming to an end. And the experience that I had just in such a short period of time changed. And so my aunt was hysterical because my uncle was on business the night before in Denver. And we thought that he potentially was in one of these planes because he was flying back to New York. He finally called. It must have been 8 o'clock at night. I don't know. And he said, hey guys, the phones have been out all day. I'm really sorry. I've been trying. I know you probably panicked, but I'm okay. I'm stuck in Denver. I'll catch a flight tomorrow. And we talked for a minute and we were getting ready to hang up. And he was like, hey, listen, before I let you go, I wanted to tell you something. So my friend Tim that you all met just a couple of days ago at the house, he was in the towers this morning and he died. And it really hit me in that moment, Amy, that, we really don't know how much time we have on earth here. And so I thought to myself in that moment too, right in that moment, I said, man, I didn't even know this guy, Tim, and he was willing to just give us his car. I mean, it's a radically generous act. I mean, there was plenty of people that wanted to support us and were trying to be nice and help us, brought food over to the house and all these different things over the next couple of months, but no one did what Tim did. And it turns out that Tim was known for being a really generous guy. He worked for Cantor Fitzgerald, an investment firm. They were headquartered in New York City in the World Trade Center. And that morning they lost their entire staff. If you've ever watched the stories or the press conference, or there's even documentaries done now, Howard Lutnick was the name of he's the CEO and founder of Cantor Fitzgerald. And he's the only one that survived that attack because uncharacteristically, he was lucky enough to have to take his child to school that morning. And he never was late. He was always the first one in the office. But for whatever reason, that morning, he was spared. But it's the most emotional press conference because this guy lost everyone. But Cantor Fitzgerald in general was known for being generous people because, as you know, and I've mentioned this before, they donated office space to my uncle's foundation for cystic fibrosis. And so there's a very, very giving culture there. And so my experience during that period of time in my life is something that I'll never forget. Now, did I know immediately in that moment the importance of generosity and how it's a great tool for joy and fulfillment in your personal life and also growth in your business? No, I had no idea. But I knew right then in that moment that there was some importance to that. And there's a reason why generosity is part of our lives. So over the past 23 years now, I've slowly, and I admit slowly, but I've slowly been figuring out the importance of generosity and how it can change people's lives. And so there's plenty of other things and stories them comical about that period of time in my life, some of them more emotional. But that one is the most meaningful because it helped me realize about the importance of generosity. And it's really given me 23 years worth of lessons.
Have you ever thought about having multiple streams of income? Instead of relying on just one stream of income where you're trading your time for money, how would you like to free up more of your time and live a more abundant life? As a listener of the show, you're invited to attend one of our upcoming trainings where I'll give you an inside look into how you can add passive income and get all the other perks of recession-resistant real estate investing without the headaches of being a landlord. I'll also be sharing some hidden mistakes to avoid and the criteria I personally look for when evaluating potential investment opportunities. To reserve your seat for free, go to silvuscapital.com/webinar. Again, that special link to reserve your seat for free is silvuscapital.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you on the training. And now back to the show. Bob, I cannot thank you enough for sharing that story. That's the second time I've heard it, and I'm still as speechless as the last time you told it, because how impactful on so many levels that you took what you said was, is your life coming to an end? Is the world coming to an end? I mean, talk about a pivotal moment. And you could have done anything with those experiences. You could feel like the world was out to get you and you could get really salty and angry. Or you could do what you've done, which is teach others, help others, be generous with your experience and your knowledge to multiply, even coming on this podcast to tell the story and just help people. I mean, what an incredible example you are to us all of living abundantly in terms of being so generous.
No, I appreciate that feedback. And, I mentioned about Cantor Fitzgerald, and I've known other people that have worked for them since then. And they're a thriving business, even given all the ups and downs in the market and the investment world over the years, as there is, if you've ever worked in that industry or just familiar with it. And I don't think it's a surprise that despite losing all but one of their people and their entire business practically, that they are back thriving as a business a couple of decades later because they have a giving culture. And I'll never forget that lesson. And you mentioned about finding the positive and the silver lining in those things. I know that can be somewhat cliche, and I'll be the first to admit it. There were some dark times in September, October, November, December of 2021 for me. Whether that was physically dark or mentally dark, as I mentioned, when I was hit with the mental aspect of my mortality, that really hit me too. So there were some very, very tough times. But I believe what happened at the onset of that whole situation was critical for helping me get through everything that I did. And I can point to about the 2-year mark. At that point, I think the emotions had enough time to work through everything that I did. And once I hit that point and I was now a junior in college, rising senior, getting ready to, take that next step in life, I guess, I think at that point is when I really started to, I don't know if the word is implement, but really start to use some of those lessons in my life. So another key point to this whole story is that this stuff takes time. You mentioned about, there's a couple of things that I could share to help an organization build a generous culture. Absolutely. And I hope you use a couple of those things that I just mentioned. But the fact is, this is an ongoing effort. And I had this saying that I use when I talk to organizations that maybe feel like it's not going as fast as they like, or maybe they're not finding as much joy in the giving. And the fact is, when you put joy in the journey, you'll find fulfillment in the finish. And if you think the journey is going to be a couple of days long, you're not going to find it. It's something that you have to work at consistently. And those habits are not habits that, well, as we mentioned, that the world is going to support you in many cases, especially in the business world. And there's nothing against business, believe me. I mean, I'm a business person, you're in business. We should be pitching our wares and the services that we offer, especially if you believe you can make a difference in someone's business or their life. So don't take this the wrong way. The key, though, is that finding the things that you do well and are meaningful to you first before. So if you're starting a business, and this is a very, very simplified example, but if you're starting a business, the first thing you do is figure out what you want to give and how you want to support and serve others.
Yes.
You don't you don't try to find all the things, the technology and all the things that you need to buy first. First, you got to figure out what you're going to give. And I think it's just like that in life and in any other space as well.
Joy in the journey and fulfillment in the finish. Did I get that right, Bob?
Yes, 100%. If you find that, I'm telling you, I've never, this is a foolproof, this is a foolproof scenario. I've never found someone who had joy in the journey, in the work that they do. And then when that season of life or business or work is over, that they did not find fulfillment. Every single time, if you can find joy in the work that you do, whether you're at a company for 40 years serving as an employee, or if you own a business, a small business, it doesn't matter. If you find joy in what you're doing, you're going to find fulfillment in the finish. And this extends to the people you work with. And this is why I say that generous cultures attract top talented people. Because if you have a talented person and you treat them well, and perhaps treating them well means letting them go and spread their wings and start their own business or move on to another company. But if they find joy in the work that they do at your organization, if they're finished at your organization, and they find fulfillment in that finish, they're going to share that with other people. Their experiences are going to help you and the brand of your organization. So when you help others do the same, find joy in the journey, whatever that finish is, whether that's they work for you for a couple of years or they're your number one employee for 25 years or 30 years, they're going to find that fulfillment and they're going to talk about it. No one ever finds fulfillment and joy and has a great experience and just doesn't want to share it with people. We all know that we want to share when something goes well.
I love that. Bob, this has been incredible on so many levels. Thank you so much for being generous with your time and abundant with your time. I'm sure a whole bunch of people are going to want to get in touch with you. What is the best way to reach out to you?
Best way, BobDePasquale.com is my website. And you can find my social links, anything there. My DMs are open on the socials. I'm a big fan of LinkedIn, as you are too, Amy. So anyone can find me there, the Bob DePasquale, the generosity guy on LinkedIn.
Perfect. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes. Bob, thank you again for sharing all of your wisdom. You are incredible. I look forward to keeping in touch with you. And thanks for all you've done for so many people. You're amazing.
Amy, I admire your work ethic and the things that you do in the real estate space. So thank you so much for having us. And I wish everyone out there a generous day.
Yes. Have an abundant day, everyone. Thanks again. Bye for now.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of the Secrets to Abundant Living podcast. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights that will empower you on your journey towards abundance. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us, and it helps others discover the secrets to an abundant life too. Stay connected with us on LinkedIn, Amy Silvis. Keep striving for your goals, nurturing your relationships, and embracing the adventure that is life. Until next time, we wish you an abundantly fulfilling day.